The dust on the trail to the Double M was the color of old bones, and it clung to everything: the cracked leather of saddlebags, the dry sweat on a man's neck, the very air he breathed. For 3 days, Elias Trent had ridden through this god-forsaken stretch of New Mexico territory, a land so parched it seemed to suck the hope right out of her body. He was a man who'd long since given up on hope, anyway. He was a man who traded in lead and finality, his reputation as a gunslinger preceding him like a bad smell. He was fast. Some said the fastest. He was accurate, a fact attested to by the graves of 6 men who'd thought otherwise. The Double M wasn't much to look at. A tired farmhouse, the sagging porch, a barn that leaned further south with every gust of wind, and a few hundred acres of baked, stubborn land that barely yielded enough to keep a family alive, let alone prosper. But it was land. And land was the only currency that mattered out here. It was the only thing worth dying for. And the only thing worth killing for. Elias reined in his horse, a dusty bay named Hairwire, and surveyed the scene. From the porch, a figure watched him. She was a woman, small and sturdy, dressed in a simple, faded dress. Her hair, the color of dark honey, was pulled back tightly, but a few strands had escaped to frame a face that was all hard angles and tired eyes. There was a shotgun cradled in her arms, not aimed, but ready. That was good. A cautious woman lived longer. "You're the one they called Trent," she called out, her voice carrying across the yard with surprising strength. "Elias Trent, ma'am," he replied, tipping his hat. "I hear you got a problem." "I got a pack of wolves on 2 legs," she said, walking to the edge of the porch. "They call themselves the Veritas Land and Cattle Company. They're trying to take what's mine. And the local law, the sheriff is in their pocket. The marshal is too far away to care." She studied him, her gaze as sharp as a skinning knife. "You don't look like much." "I've been told that before," Elias said dispassionately. "Most of the men who told me ain't around to repeat it." The corner of her mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My name is Marigold McAllister. This was my husband's land. He died last winter. Influenza. Left me with 2 boys and a mountain of debt." She gestured with the shotgun. "There's an abandoned lion shack by the creek. You can stay there. I can't pay you in coin, but there's food in the pantry, and a roof over your head." "My fee is $200, Elias said, his voice flat. "Money talks, ma'am. I don't work for promises." Marigold's jaw tightened. She looked away, and for a moment she seemed to shrink, the burden of her situation pressing down on her. "I don't have $200. I have a few head of cattle, a rickety wagon, and a broken plow. I have a deed that says this land is mine. That's all I have." "Then we're at an impasse," Elias said, making to turn his horse. "Wait." Her voice cracked. He stopped. "I have something else," she said, her voice quieter now, laced with shame. "In the house. My wedding ring. It's gold. It's worth $150. Maybe. The rest I can pay you in provisions, and I can give you a reason." Elias turned back. "What reason is that?" "Because if you walk away, a month from now, you won't even remember my name. But you'll have let a woman and 2 children be thrown out into the dirt by men who have everything and want more. You'll have walked away from a fight that's just. I hear you have a reputation, Mr. Trent. A reputation for being fast with those Colts on your hips. A gun isn't just about speed. It's about what you do with it. Is your reputation only about how fast you can kill? Or does it also stand for something?" The words hung in the air, heavy as the summer heat. Elias saw the fire in her eyes, a desperate, defiant fire that refused to be extinguished. He saw a woman who had nothing left to lose but her pride, and she was willing to pour even that to save her home. It struck a chord in him, a deep and forgotten chord that had been silent for a long, long time. He dismounted, the leather of his saddle creaking in the silence. "I'll take a look at the lion shack," he said, "and we can discuss the ring after I've seen the situation." It was a compromise. It was the closest he'd come to a negotiation in years. Normally, it was simple, the price was the price, and the job was done. But something in Marigold McAllister's sun-baked face and her iron will made him pause. Maybe it was the memory of his own mother, a woman who'd struggled to keep a roof over his head after his father died in a drunken brawl. Maybe it was just the sheer hopelessness of her situation that appealed to the part of him that had been forged in the fires of his own personal hell. He didn't know. He didn't want to examine it too closely. The lion shack was as promised, a single room made of rough-hewn logs, a cot with a straw mattress, a pot-bellied stove, and a table that listed to one side. It was dusty and smelled of mice, but it was a roof. He'd slept in worse. He was sweeping out the worst of the dirt when the door opened, and a boy of about 10 peered in. He had the same dark honey hair as his mother and eyes the color of a clear mountain stream. "You're the man my ma hired?" the boy asked, his voice a mix of awe and suspicion. "Looks that way," Elias said, not stopping his sweeping. "My name is Sam. My brother, Ben, he's 7. He's scared of you." "He should be," Elias said, not looking up. "Ma says you're going to make the bad men go away." "Your ma says a lot of things." Sam stepped inside, emboldened. "Are you really fast? With your guns? I saw you ride in. I saw the big iron on your hip. Is it true you can draw and fire before a man can blink?" Elias stopped sweeping and turned to look at the boy. He saw the hero worship in his eyes, a desperate need for a champion. It was a heavy weight to put on a man's shoulders, especially a man like him. "It's not about being fast," Elias said, his voice low. "It's about being better. It's about using your head, not just to trigger your finger. Speed is worthless without good judgment." "But you're the fastest," Sam insisted. "Boy," Elias said, pinning him with a cold stare, "let me tell you something. Being fast is what keeps you alive. But being smart is what lets you sleep at night. Now, get on out of here. I got work to do." Sam scrambled away. But he wasn't deterred. He and his little brother, Ben, became a constant, quiet presence on the periphery of Elias's world. They watched him practice his draws in the morning, the smooth, fluid movement of his hands, a hypnotic ballet of death. They listened as he planned defenses with their mother, their big eyes taking in every word. Marigold, despite her initial hesitation, had a fierce, practical intelligence. She knew the land better than anyone, every gully, every ridge, every possible approach for an enemy. Their plan was a simple one, a deterrence. Elias's reputation was the primary weapon. He was a rock in the stream, and the Veritas men, if they were smart, would just flow around him. If they didn't, he would have to make them pay for the attempt. He set up a series of false camps using two dummies he fashioned from hay and old clothes to create the illusion of a larger force. He posted himself on the highest ridge, a position from which he could see the entire valley, his Winchester 73 resting across his saddle. "The ring, Mrs. McAllister," he said one evening after a long day. "It's payment. A promise that I am not going anywhere." She looked at him, her eyes troubled. She'd come to expect less from men. "It's on my dresser," she said softly. "Come and get it." He followed her into the farmhouse, a space that was modest but clean. A photograph of a stern-looking man with kind eyes, her late husband, sat on the mantel. In the bedroom, she took a simple gold band from a small box on the dresser. She held it for a moment, her thumb stroking the worn metal. He saw the grief pass over her face like a cloud. It was a private moment, when he felt like an intruder on "Are you sure?" he asked, the words surprising him. She looked up, her eyes clear. "It's just a thing, Mr. Trent. Just a piece of metal." She handed it to him. "My home, my boys' island, those aren't just things. Those are my life." He took the ring, his fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was rough, callous from hard work, but warm. He felt a strange jolt, a spark of something he'd thought long dead. He tucked the ring into his vest pocket, close to his heart, and nodded. "They won't take any of it, Mrs. McAllister. I'll see to it." The first visit from the Reiters came 3 days later. 5 men, led by a man named Frank Corbin, the local foreman. They were on big, well-fed horses, their clothes clean and their faces smug. Corbin was a big man with a red face and a nose like a potato. He was flanked by 3 hard-bitten cowboys and a man in a suit, a lawyer named Pence, who was the company's hand. "McAllister," Corbin bellowed, his voice echoing across the yard. "We got a final offer from the company. $300 for the property. That's the best we can do. You've got until sundown to clear out." Elias stepped out from the barn, the sun glinting off the twin colts on his hips. He walked slowly, his spurs jingling with a rhythmic, menacing chime. He stopped about 20 feet from Corbin's horse and looked up at them, his face a mask of indifference. "I believe you're trespassing," Elias said, his voice deceptively quiet. "Mrs. McAllister doesn't wish to sell." Corbin's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" "This is none of your business." "It's my business now," Elias said. "My name is Trent, and you're on the wrong side of the fence." The name had an immediate effect. The cowboys shifted in their saddles. Pence the lawyer went pale. Corbin, however, was made of sterner stuff. "Trent," he sneered. "The legend? I heard you were dead. Or just a myth." He leaned forward in his saddle. "You think you scare me with a name? This is land we've been trying to get for a year. A pretty little widow isn't gonna stand in our way, and neither is some washed-up gunman." Elias's hand didn't move, but his eyes became impossibly cold. "You should be scared, Corbin. You got 5 men. I only need 1 bullet for the leader. The rest of you are just insurance. My advice to the rest of you is to ride out of here while you can still draw a breath." The 5 men looked at each other. The lawyer's hand was trembling. One cowboy was sweating profusely. Corbin's face was a mottled, ugly red. He was not a man used to being challenged, especially by a lone dusty figure in a leather duster. "This isn't the end," Corbin snarled, pulling his horse around. "You've just made a powerful enemy, Trent. We'll be back, and we won't be making offers." As they rode away, Elias heard a small cheer from the barn. Sam and Ben had been watching. Marigold appeared in the doorway, her face pale but her eyes shining with a fierce pride. "You did it," she breathed. "You scared them off." "For now," Elias said, his gaze still fixed on the retreating figures. "They'll be back, and next time, they won't be looking to negotiate. They'll be looking to kill." The weeks that followed were a time of strange, intense peace. Elias worked alongside Marigold, repairing fences, mending the barn, and checking the water holes. He was a man of few words, but his presence was a solid, comforting one. He ate his meals with the family, sitting at the small table listening to Sam's endless chatter and Ben's shy comments. He found himself looking at Marigold more and more. He watched the way her hair caught the afternoon light, the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating on a difficult task, the way she laughed a warm, unexpected sound when Sam told a joke. He saw her strength, her resilience, her unwavering dedication to her boys and her land. It was a kind of courage he hadn't seen in a long time, a courage that didn't require a gun to be powerful. For a part, Marigold began to see past the stoic exterior of the Gunslinger. She saw the gentleness in his hands when he helped Ben climb onto a fence post. She saw the sadness in his eyes when he looked at the photograph of her husband. She saw a man carrying a heavy burden, a man who had seen too much death, a man who was seeking some kind of redemption in the quite dusty corners of her land. One evening, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and purple, they sat on the porch. The boys were in bed. The cicadas were beginning their nightly chorus. "Why do you do it?" Marigold asked softly. "This life, the gunfights, the danger, the constant moving on." Elias was quiet for a long moment, staring at the horizon. "It's what I'm good at. It's the only thing I'm good at." "That's a lie," she said simply. "I've seen you fix a broken gate, help Sam with his arithmetic, and calm a frightened cough. You have a good heart, Elias Trent. You just keep it buried deep." He turned to look at her, his eyes unreadable. "A good heart gets you killed in my line of work. It gets the people you care about killed." "So you've cared about people before?" she pressed gently. He looked away, a muscle in his jaw tightening. "I was in love once, a long time ago. Her name was Lily. She was a school teacher in a little town in Kansas. We were going to be married. I left one day to go after some outlaws who'd held up the bank. I was tracking them for a week. I killed all 3 of them. When I got back to town, she was dead. They'd come back while I was gone. It was revenge. They killed her because I'd killed them. They burned her schoolhouse down around her." The story hung in the air, a ghostly echo of tragedy. Marigold reached out and placed her hand over his. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. Her touch was warm, a small, fragile anchor in his sea of guilt. "That wasn't your fault," she said. "Yes, it was," he said, his voice a ragged whisper. "I should have been there. I should have been protecting her. Instead, I was just being fast." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just a desperate widow, but a woman of profound strength and resilience. He saw a mirror of his own loneliness, a reflection of the life he'd given up on. He saw a woman who deserved to be happy, who deserved to be loved. Without a word, he leaned in, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Her eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. He kissed her softly, gently, a kiss that tasted of dust and sorrow and the faintest hint of hope. It was a kiss born not of passion, but of a deep, aching loneliness and a fragile, burgeoning connection. When he pulled back, her face was flushed in the fading light. "Elias," he began, but he cut her off. "I'm a dangerous man, Marigold," he said, his voice thick. "The men I've killed, the life I've lived, there's a stain on my soul that can never be washed away. I'm not a good man. I'm just the fast one." "I don't care about that," she said, her voice firm. "I see the man you are now, the man you've been for these last few weeks. That's the man I see." He shook his head, his sadness palpable. "I wish I could believe that, but I know the truth. The world I live in doesn't allow for men like me to have a good life. It always catches up to you. And when it does, you can't have anything left to lose." The moment was broken by the sound of distant thunder, but it wasn't thunder. It was the sound of many horses, riding hard. The attack came at dawn. Corbin had managed to hire a trio of killers to back his play. They were men like Elias, men who lived by the gun, men who had no loyalty except to the man paying their wages. There were 8 of them in total, riding in a tight formation, their intent clear. Elias was awake, having not slept a wink. He'd been expecting them. He had Marigold and the boys tucked away in the root cellar under the house. His plan was simple: make a stand at the barn, using the cover and the high ground of the loft. He couldn't let them get close to the house. They came over the ridge at full gallop, firing their rifles into the air and shouting, It was meant to be intimidating. Elias, perched in the hayloft, waited until they were 100 yards out before he drew a bead on the rider in front. He squeezed the trigger of his Winchester. The man flew backward off his horse dead before he hit the ground. The charge faltered. They scattered, taking cover behind a rock formation and a dry wash. From then on, it was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Elias was a crack shot, able to drop a man from 200 yards with his rifle, but there were too many of them, and they were professional. They flanked him, laying down a constant barrage of fire that dinged him in the barn. Bullets ripped through the wooden walls, sending splinters flying. He was outgunned and outnumbered. A bullet screamed past his face, burrowing into the wooden beam beside him. Another thudded into his arm, a hot, searing pain that felt like a brand. He grunted, switching his Winchester to his left hand, but his accuracy was compromised. He was in trouble. He could hear them moving in, calling out to each other. Then, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. A scream. It was Marigold. They'd gotten to the house. He scrambled down from the loft, ignoring the pain in his arm, and sprinted across the yard. He saw a man dragging Marigold by her hair toward the barn, his gun pressed to her head. The man was huge, with a scarred face and a cruel smile. "Trent," the man bellowed, "come on out, or I put a bullet in the woman's pretty head." Elias stopped in the middle of the yard, his world narrowing to a single point of focus. He was a statue of cold fury. The rest of the men were forming a semicircle around him in the farmhouse. Corbin stood among them, his face a mask of pure triumph. In that moment, he knew he had no tricks left, no strategies. The only thing he had was his speed and his accuracy. "Let her go," Elias said, his voice so low it was almost a growl. "This is between us." "Oh, I don't think so," the scarred man laughed. "I think this is between you and the floorboards." He dragged Marigold forward, shoving her to the ground at Elias's feet. "You see, we're supposed to kill you, but I'd rather make you watch her die. It'll be more fun." "Elias, run!" Marigold begged from the ground, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "They're going to kill you. Just go." He looked at her. She was in the dirt, terrified and defiant, and she was telling him to leave her. He saw the love and the fear in her eyes, and he knew he couldn't do it. He couldn't run away again. He couldn't let another woman he cared for die because of his choices. He was going to make a stand, a final, desperate stand. The scarred man raised his gun, pointing it at Marigold's head. He was a sadist, and he was savoring the moment. Elias's hand hovered over his Colt. His mind, calm and clear in the face of death, measured the distance, the angles, the play of light on the man's gun. Corbin saw his intent. "Kill him," he screamed. The scarred man's finger tightened on the trigger, but he was glancing at Elias, not where he was shooting. It was all the opening Elias needed. The world had dissolved into a thunderous blur of noise and movement. His draw was so fast, it was almost invisible. The gleaming metal of his Colt was in his hand. The hammer was back, and the first shot was a hammer blow of sound that shattered the morning air. The bullet took the scarred man square in the forehead before he could complete his thought. The man's gun went off, but the bullet plowed harmlessly into the dirt inches from Marigold's head. Elias didn't stop. He was a whirlwind of destruction. His second shot was already on its way as the scarred man was falling, taking Corbin just below his red nose, the bullet tearing through his face and killing him He was still moving, his left hand now holding his second Colt, the barrel spitting fire and lead. The men behind Corbin never had a chance. They were caught in the middle of the yard, their legs turning to water. Elias's guns roared, a continuous, deafening rhythm of death. He'd trained for this, lived for this. This was the legend. The first man fell, clutching his chest. The second was hit in the throat, collapsing with a gurgle. Another man, turning to run, was shot in the back. Elias was a force of nature, a grim reaper in a dusty duster. He moved forward, his face a mask of cold, detached violence, his pistols roaring and spitting fire. It was over in a matter of seconds. 5 men lay dead in the yard. The 6th, the one who had turned to run, was shot in the leg and fell, screaming. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the whimpering of the wounded man and the heavy, ragged sound of Elias's own breathing. He stood in the middle of the carnage, his arms hanging at his sides, the smoke curling from the twin barrels of his Colts. His face was pale, his eyes empty. He'd just killed 5 men. He'd saved Marigold. He'd done his job. He holstered his guns and walked over to her, helping her to her feet. She was shaking, but her eyes were wide and full of awe. "Elias," she whispered, but he cut her off. "Get the boys," he said, his voice hollow. "We need to get out of here. More will come. They'll never stop." He saw the look in her eyes, the dawning horror at what he'd become in that moment. He saw the realization that the man she'd been getting to know, the gentleman who'd fixed the gate and taught her son arithmetic, was a killer, a creature of blood and violence. "I told you," he said, his voice flat. "I told you I was a dangerous man. This is what I am. This is what I do. There are men who will say I did the right thing. They'll call it justice. But they weren't here. They didn't see the blood. They didn't hear the death rattles. I did. I always do." He turned away from her, his steps heavy. He went to the line shack, his movements wooden. He gathered his saddlebags, his spare cloaks. He'd left the wedding ring on the small table. He walked back to the farmhouse, where she was waiting with her boys, their faces pale and scared. He handed her the simple gold band. "Keep this," he said, his voice barely audible. "It's worth more to you than to me. It belonged to a good man." He saddled Haywire, his movements mechanical. He heard her footsteps on the porch, but he didn't turn around. He was just about to swing into the saddle when he heard Sam's voice, broken and tearful. "Don't go, Mr. Trent." He stopped, his back still to them. He closed his eyes. He could hear Ben crying softly. He could feel Marigold's gaze boring into his back, a silent plea he didn't deserve. He knew he couldn't stay. If he stayed, they'd be targets. His presence was a target. The only way to keep them safe was to leave. He mounted Haywire, a leather of the saddle groaning in protest. He didn't look back. He couldn't look back. He touched his heels to the horse's flanks, and they started off down the long, dusty trail. He could feel her eyes following him until he was a small, lonely figure against the horizon, a ghost riding away from the one place on earth that had ever felt like home. He was a man doomed to be alone, a fast gun with nowhere to go. He was the legend, and legends don't get happy endings. They just get stories. And this one was over.